I want to say good luck, kind of good luck. How about one of us wins the division and one of us makes the wild? No, I don't want the wild card again. No, you guys get the wild card. The Pirates can win division. How's that?
Hey man, if you guys are gonna let us have it, maybe tone it down a little bit. We're playing you again before the All-Star break.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Donut Bag, part of the Pod Hub Network. In this episode, I continue a series of previewing the teams in the NL Central. In this episode, I preview the Brewers with Vincent Craig from the Brew Crew Review Podcast. The Donut Bag starts right now. Okay, now to continue our series previewing the teams in the NL Central, it's time for the Brewers. With me, I have couple guys from the Brew Crew Review Milwaukee Brewers podcast, Vincent Craig. Guys, how you doing?
Hey Joey, how are you? Good to talk to you tonight.
Doing great.
Doing great. Thanks for having us on.
Thank you. Wow, the Brewers, man, what an amazing season they had last year. That had to be beyond your wildest expectations to almost make it to the World Series.
Yeah, I mean, we were, if you look back at 2017, we were one game out from making the playoffs or the postseason in 2017, kind of a disappointing end of the year against the Rockies. But, certainly to go as far as we did in the playoffs last year, it was a pretty exciting season in Milwaukee. And, I think a lot of Brewer fans would agree. But game 163 against the Cubs, was probably one of the highlights for the Brewers in the last 10 years. I think that, obviously, it's a very tough division, and I think top to bottom in the NL Central, you're going to find a lot of great teams. But last year was pretty exciting for Milwaukee.
Absolutely. I mean, the Brewers' season almost got torpedoed, actually, by the Pittsburgh Pirates. I think just before the All-Star break last year, the Brewers actually had a rain makeup game as well as a 4-game set against the Pirates, a 5-game series, and they got swept by the Pirates. And it wasn't looking too good. But then after the All-Star break in the second half, Christian Yelich basically took the Brewers on his back and carried them all the way into the playoffs and nearly to the World Series. Obviously, our awesome lockdown bullpen was also a huge factor in that. But, wow, what a great second half as a Brewer fan.
Amazing. Christian Yelich was just, wow, what a pickup. Almost getting a triple crown. That is incredible.
Yeah, he's such an awesome player, and I mean, for what we gave up to acquire him, it was just, and with the team control, still having him for 4 years beyond this, it was definitely probably one of the greatest trades in franchise history. As it'll go down, I'm sure.
Yeah, but this offseason not as busy. Is Moustakas your biggest pickup?
I would actually say Yasmani Grandal is probably our biggest acquisition. When you've got a guy like Manny Pena now as our backup catcher, I think that really solidifies the lineup kind of top to bottom and makes us all that much stronger. So I would probably say Yasmani Grandal, and then Mike Moustakas would be our number 2. And let's not forget, a team like the Brewers really relies a lot on the bullpen. So we've made a couple bullpen acquisitions that I think could also be valuable, but I would have to rate Grandal as our number 1 acquisition this winter.
Yeah, I would agree with Vince on that, and I also add that Mike Moustakas really wanted to come back as a Brewer, even though we were still set at third base with Travis Shaw, all the way to the point where he's willing to learn a new position, second base, this year, so he can fit on the roster and the starting lineup. So I really expect a big season from him and Grandal, and I think the Brewers lineup top to bottom is pretty scary going into this year, and pretty exciting for sure.
It is scary. There's really no weaknesses. Maybe Arcia, maybe not the maybe he'll become a great hitter, but I guess the only question is, can Moustakas play second base?
Yeah, that's a great question. You would think that if he were able to do that, they would have had him do that when he came over via trade last year instead of sliding Travis Shaw over, who kind of raised his hand and said, hey, I'll try playing second. So I think between the two of them last year, so as a fallback plan, I think that would be the case. And, of course, as a even more of a fallback plan, our number one prospect down in AAA this year will be Keston Hiura, and he can also fill in at second too. But I think we'll definitely find a way to get Shaw and Masaka's bats in the lineup for sure.
Yeah, another question is Ryan Braun. He's getting a little old. Are you concerned that he might be falling off? He might, his production might be getting pretty bad?
Yeah, I think the thing with him is just staying on the field. He's been really kind of injury plagued for much of the last few years as he gets upward in age. But when his bat's actually in the lineup, he does fairly well. He's obviously not his old MVP self, but I still think he's got a great veteran bat, and he puts together quality bats if he can be, in the lineup.
And he's also made a couple of adjustments in his swing, over spring training. He actually talked about what he was going to do to change his swing a little bit, and he's taken into consideration a little bit more of the lift factor, and talked about a few of the more, recent developments and kind of an ability to analyze a swing. So we'll see what he does, but, he still is a talented guy. I think that his contract is, a bit cumbersome for an organization like Milwaukee, but, since he signed it in 2011, the annual value is a little bit reasonable, for a franchise like the Brewers who want to keep a guy for a long-term contract as well.
Now, Jimmy Nelson, he missed last year. Are you expecting him back this year, full strength, or is he still going to miss some time?
He actually just pitched yesterday in a spring training game where he was able to throw, I think, Craig, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he threw 3 innings where he was able to record it. I think he was 9 up and 9 down yesterday. He had a little bit more topsy-turvy outing his first time out in spring training. So I think he's thrown 2 outings so far in spring training. And obviously the guy was, pitching at an ace level in 2017 when he got injured in kind of a freak accident with a shoulder injury. So remains to be seen. It'll be really, I don't know that the Brewers can necessarily count on a guy like that. I tend to think he's going to need some extended spring training. Maybe come up to the big club around May 1st, but I could be wrong on that. And Craig, we haven't talked about this before in the last couple of weeks at least. I don't know what your thoughts are on Nelson, but that's kind of my initial take.
Well, yeah, when you miss a whole season due to injury, and especially to the shoulder like Nelson did, you can only expect so much. So I think the Brewers will kind of handle him cautiously this year. And the number one thing is he's not going to be able to throw 150-plus innings since he didn't throw any last year. So I think the Brewers would be wise to just get as many quality innings as they can out of him and possibly maybe even save him more for later in the season or hopefully playoff-type atmosphere time and limit his innings until then. And I think because of the depth in the rotation with some of the young guns they have, and I'm specifically talking about Corbin Burns and Brandon Woodruff and also Freddie Peralta, I think that they can kind of fill in the innings until Nelson is able to pitch his. So with that being said, I do expect him to pitch some quality and meaningful innings for the Brewers this year. When it will be, like I agree with Vince, it probably won't be till after May 1st, at least at the major league level. And even then, I think they might, limit him to maybe 5 innings, 5-6 tops per start, just so that they can kind of control his innings pitch over the course of the entire season.
Now the bullpen, that was definitely a strength last year. You basically have 3 closers. That's a nice luxury. Do you think it'll be just as good and maybe better this year?
I tend to think it really comes down to if Jeremy Jeffers is going to be healthy. He has actually suffered from some shoulder discomfort this spring. Hasn't pitched a ton. I think he's going to start the year on the disabled list. So that means that we're down to the 2 former closers. We did get Claudio from the Rangers, so he's another quality left-handed arm in the pen. But I do think that Josh Hader is what he is. I mean, he's a dominant left-handed pitcher, and I think he's going to be as good this year as he was last year. Corey Knebel's had his ups and downs over the last couple of seasons, and I think that he's got a ton of talent. It just kind of is predicated on kind of where he's at any given moment. He has his ups and downs, but the Brewers bullpen is definitely strong. So I think that Claudio is going to help things. I think that we've signed a few guys, in the past couple of years that could make a difference. But I think that a lot comes down to Jeremy Jeffers and his injury.
Yeah, I still think our bullpen is our number one strength on the team. Obviously, the big X factor and everything is Josh Hader. He's not a closer and probably won't be closing out games unless it just lines up that way. But he's basically used as a weapon whenever we need to put out any type of late inning rally, and he absolutely is dominant. So he's like the MVP of the team outside of Yelich, if you ask me. So with that being said, Corey Knebel last year did lose his closer job in the first half of the year, and he got it back for eventually. But and Jeremy Jeffers filled in admirably. But those guys did have some ups and downs, each of them. And I think if they both put in a strong season, our bullpen would benefit from it. But I agree with Vince. I'm a little bit concerned with Jeffers' arm going into through spring training here. But I do expect a huge season from Knebel and the rest of our bullpen, including additions like Vince talked about, like Claudio from the Rangers, the left-hander. I think from top to bottom we'll have a great bullpen, and all those other arms I mentioned, most likely one or two of them will slot once Nelson is back into our bullpen and bridge that gap from starter to late inning relievers. And I think someone like Brandon Woodruff really profiles perfectly for that role as he kind of served for that in September of last year too. And I'm pretty high on him as well as the other guys. So should be a strong staff overall, top to bottom.
So what do you think? How do you think they're going to finish in the NL Central this year? Sounds like it's going to be a really tight division.
I think that the Brewers are pretty much bringing back everyone from last year, and they were the NL Central champions, and they're adding in Yasmani Grandal, and I think that they're even better than last year, and will benefit from the experience. With that being said, the Cubs have not had the greatest offseason, in my opinion. I think they're relying on Chris Bryant and Yu Darvish to bounce back from an injury-plagued season to fuel them. The Cardinals, on the other hand, have really had a great offseason, in my opinion, by adding most notably is Paul Goldschmidt, perennial MVP candidate in the NL, to the middle of their lineup. That scares me for sure. And also even their bullpen with adding a guy like Andrew Miller, even though he's not exactly as good as he used to be, that I think really makes their team a lot better. So they've improved greatly. I think that if I had to guess, that they're probably past the Cubs and our biggest threat now. And even a team like the Cincinnati Reds, though, have really made improvements and this offseason big time, and they've completely rebuilt their entire starting pitching staff. And they made that big trade with the Dodgers, and they actually brought in Puig and Kemp. And I think they're definitely planning on being a good team this year. I just don't think that they have enough yet to overtake the Cubs, Brewers, or Cardinals. And the Pirates also are still, coming through with their rebuilding phase, and they have a pretty strong team. In Chris Archer, of course, and Jameson Taillon, and a bunch of young hitters still. I think that they're going to be formidable too. So there's really not a really weak team in the NL Central. I think it's pretty much the best division in baseball this year.
Yeah, they're going to on paper, it seems like everybody's pretty close and tight, and it's going to be a really tight race. But usually on paper, when stuff like that happens, that means that one team's going to win like 120 games and just run away with the thing.
Well, and the Cubs were beset by a lot of injuries last year. You know that they're going to be tough. I think, Craig, you pointed out that the Cardinals got Goldschmidt. I think that's obviously a great acquisition. And then I think that there's a ton of talent in both Cincinnati and Pittsburgh. I mean, everybody in the division is talented. You can't really write off anybody at this point. So the Brewers may have won the division last year. I certainly don't think it's going to be easy to repeat. That being said, I think that most people in Milwaukee are pretty optimistic just because there hasn't been a ton of talent that left the team. But I do think it's a very, very tough division.
I don't know if you heard, but the Cubs said they're broke. So could you pass the word on the Brewers and maybe just a few pity wins just for the poor Cubs?
I think we can all hate the Cubs. That being said, you guys really handled us right before the All-Star break in Pittsburgh last year, so that wasn't necessarily the most fun for Milwaukee fans at that point.
Yeah, it's like we were talking before the call. For a while there, the Pirates just could never win in Milwaukee. We blamed it on the shadows. Actually, like